pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So you know the one that's close next door to Amplify do so.
They are? Oh, that sounds like fun. Oh, hey, Chris. How are you? Good. Okay, so we're going to get right to it. We're going to skip the first executive session and move that to later. We're going to have a conversation with Travis Miller, who I thought was in the building.
He is.
He's in the men's room. Okay, so we're going to come right back to that. Let's skip. Heather does not have a town administrator report. Are there any select board updates or liaison reports?
The zoning board is having a meeting on the 25th,
Okay,
and nothing right now from CPA.
okay. Anybody else? No. All right, we're going to keep going. Randall's not here yet.
You can probably start and I'll grab them.
Okay,
You read that blurb, I bet you we can get them in here with them.
perfect. All right. So we're going to start tonight with a presentation of Community Compact Grant Study on the Fire Operations and Organizational Study by Travis Miller from the Carlson Group, who we had hired. So Travis has joined us this evening from the Carlson Group. Through the Community Compact Cabinet Program with the state, we received grant funding in order to conduct a study reviewing the operational and organizational of the fire department. Travis is here tonight to present his findings to the board. Good evening.
Hi.
Come on up. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Good to see you. Wow. Does it have a laser pointer?
I will not give you that.
That's good to hear. We're too close to too many airports to trust someone with one of those. Well, thank you for having me here. Just so you know a little bit about me and why I feel semi-qualified at least to talk about this stuff. I've been doing fire rescue, 911, and law enforcement management consulting for 21 years. I've worked with over 400 clients, have worked with somewhere between 500 and 600 different agencies, consolidation studies and things like that, or multi-jurisdictional studies. I've worked with other communities in and around here and in Massachusetts. In fact, took a way to get here. I had dinner with my mom tonight, so I took the slow way, and drove through Pelham, where I'd done a police and fire study a while ago. Police and fire station in Pelham is the nicest building in the entire town, for some reason. Okay. So the study is, for us, is a fairly routine. Scared me there for a second.
I'm backup, so don't worry.
That's good. You can go like this if I need you to.
Yeah, I can do that
Awesome.
real easy.
So the study we were asked to do is fairly routine. Essentially, take a look at the way fire department is organized and managed, and give you some opinions or ideas about things you might be able to do differently there. And then to take a look at operations with some question about, gee, what should we be doing as we look towards the future. On the operational side, right now you employ a single full-time chief. That's the only full-time position you have over there. There are a fair number of people, more than 36, who are on a part-time roster that you use to provide fire and EMS response coverage out of the station, both as call firefighters during the night and call EMTs and paramedics, as well as people who are staffing operations over there 9 hours a day, now 7 days a week. The chief participates in that stuff Monday through Friday when he's here. Today we were going back and forth on email. He's in between a couple different calls and doing an inspection, as well as doing some of the management things each day that it takes to run even a small department. Some of those administrative and management tasks have started to be detailed out to different people within the organizational structure within the fire department, which is pretty normal. As you look at agencies like this, it's really easy to find examples of fire departments that are operating like this in places like Ohio and Michigan, for whatever reason, in Pennsylvania and parts of New York State, where you'll find regions where there's a couple full-time fire departments, lots of small rural communities in the 5,000 to 12,000 person range, and all of those smaller departments, many of them are operating like you are. So they look like a full-time service where they've got people coming out of a station for 8 to 24 hours a day. They're staffing 2 to 4 to 6 people, and you walk around and look at the roster, and there's not a single full-time employee in the place except the chief. And there are people, and I've worked in some of these communities. In fact, I've worked in neighboring communities across the course of several years on different studies and ran into some of the same people who were a battalion chief here and a lieutenant over here and a paramedic over here and a firefighter medic over here, and they literally have made a career out of not working full-time any place, but literally working as itinerant firefighters, paramedics who go from place to place to place to place, and they might work 20 hours a month at this one, and they might work 60 hours a month at this one. They're just creating a job out of doing it. Ultimately, with the objective of getting hired by Dayton or Kettering or one of the other full-time departments that's out there. But this is not uncommon, and this is increasingly common around the United States. In fact, I joked about having dinner with my mom. They're headed back home right now because one of them works in the ambulance. We still have a split ambulance and fire in the town that I grew up in upstate New York, but they're employing full-time paramedics now 24 hours a day and a full-time EMT 16 hours a day to provide basic coverage to the community when it's most difficult to get people. So one of the things we point out here is that the chief has made, we think, decisions consistent with the way these kinds of operations run in terms of allocating responsibilities to deputy chiefs and officers based on his perception of what those people's skill sets are, oftentimes based on what they do for their actual full-time job department. But that it would be good in terms of managing the relationship between the town and the department to put some of that on paper and just provide it to you guys so you have a better sense as to what's going on. Thank you. I don't know if that was me or you, but thanks. Okay. Not unusual in a small community for Board of Selectmen or the City Commission or the Board of Trustees or whatever it is that you guys would be called, wherever you might be, to want to know what's going on. And part of that is because people in the community know who you are, unlike somebody in a larger city who wouldn't necessarily know the person if they ran into them, even if they'd voted for them necessarily. But again, in a small community, it's lots of personal relationships. People know you in the church or they see you at the gas station. We understand they're going to ask you questions about stuff. Some of it, frankly, you shouldn't have the answer to. Hey, I heard so-and-so had a heart attack. None of your business. Your business if her cousin also told you, but none of your business in your official capacity. The chief has no business telling you. But if there's a structure fire or if there was a fatality someplace or something like that, that isn't protected. One of the things we suggest in here is that the fire chief work with the police chief, work with dispatch to look at ways to make sure that you guys get notified about really significant events like, hey, there's a structure fire. It may be as simple a thing as adding you to the text tone package that he's already using. So you simply get added to that list. If you don't want those things at 2 o'clock in the morning, you can figure out a different protocol for those kinds of things. There's another list of things that I would put in the sort of important but not critical list. And you guys really need to define these things for yourselves. We made some suggestions, but it might be, hey, we had a multiple car accident. We had to put a helicopter on the ground someplace. Somebody might walk up and ask you. It'd be nice if you knew and didn't read about it a week later in the paper along with them. I don't think your chief or one of the firefighters that you've got should be standing out at the fire ground literally typing an email to you at 2:30 in the morning. But there needs, I think, to be an effective way, a protocol that's already been set up so that whether it's dispatch and they just take care of it, just like they call the gas company or whoever, or whether it's something that happens once a week, once a month, quarterly, that kind of a thing. And so within the report itself, we lay out a couple different kinds of reporting mechanisms, suggestions, immediate stuff, things that you really ought to know about, even if it might mean waking you up to tell you about them, or not, or you find out about them at 6 in the morning and, we have some kind of blockage about when you guys get notified. Next day kinds of stuff. And again, you really need to work this out amongst yourselves in terms of what you think is important that you know about the next day versus what you need to know about next month. Monthly list of things, so workload, missed calls. By missed calls, I mean Were there things where you were staffing, but you couldn't cover the call because you were already handling a call? Could you not get somebody to fill the shift, and so you missed a call? And that's happening less and less frequently now than it might have a couple of years ago. The chief and I spent a lot of time talking about steps that he's taken to try to reduce that occurrence. And it was the kind of thing that was occurring now, might occur once or twice a month, that kind of number, as opposed to several times that in the past. And then, the quarterly and annual kinds of things, which, whether you have them here at a meeting, these are the kinds of things you should be getting from department heads anyway, whether they come to you through a direct report by the department head standing up here for 5 minutes just saying, hey, this is the key stuff that's gone on this year or this quarter, or whether it comes to you through a report that the town administrator gives you. Different places will handle that differently. So, not unusual for a department that is in this transitional phase between relying on people who are coming from their homes and increasingly relying on people who are sitting in a station on duty. You've got multiple facilities. Right now, frankly, you need the second facility simply as a place to provide for covered parking for some of the apparatus that you've got that you simply don't have the room to put next door. If and when the community decides to pursue the sort of public safety facility concept, one of the things from my perspective that you should be thinking about is ways to get that equipment out of that station and down here. And in fact, we talk about a couple other operational changes that relate to apparatus. One thing that's unusual here, particularly unusual given how few people you've got on duty at any given time, is the fact that historically, and this is a historical holdover, you've got engines that are set up for fire, and you've got another engine that's set up for kind of rescue activities, which means that somebody needs to stop and think at whatever time of day, well, which unit do we want to take? Some of this is because of cabinetry and where there was space to put things, but from our perspective, it would be really unfortunate to show up at an accident scene and find out you were in the engine that wasn't set up for the accident. I haven't heard of that occurring, but it's just one of those things that you'd hate to have it occur, and you could do something about it now by addressing it. The other, I don't know where to point it to make it work better, but that was not it. It sounds like that game we used to play with. So I think in general, as we talk to people, the response that's being provided by the department and the community is exactly what you'd expect and probably better from a department of this size. I live in a community that is almost 7 times the size of this one. We do not have paramedics on our ambulances. We rely on a fly car from a hospital someplace. We have fire-based EMS. Our staffing is higher, but we have basic life support ambulances. You're getting a really good level of service for a community of this size. It's a big investment. We benefit from being a little bit closer to a hospital than you are, but not that much closer, really. So right now, you've got issues where you're relying pretty heavily on your neighbors if anything of any real significance were to occur, and they're relying on you being a participant today, too. In fact, I sent the chief a text from a stoplight, sort of, where I saw a brush fire as I got off of 91 on a 202 on my way to meet my mom for dinner. And he said, well, if I show up smoky, it's because we went to help Holyoke. And I just think, that's a lot of what has to happen in communities like this. The town I grew up in had 5 separate, for whatever reason, volunteer fire departments. And they had to rely on each other to do anything. I mean, they literally couldn't deal with a car accident without at least 2 of them going. I'd mentioned already trying to consolidate critical equipment onto a primary engine. One of the other things that I think as you look at the vehicle replacement plan that's out there, is that you consider reducing the total number of engines you have from 3 to 2, selling that third piece, and concentrating on updating the tanker and the brush truck that you've got. Is that a bug? Nice. Like everybody, it's increasingly difficult to get people to volunteer for things, and increasingly difficult to get people to, even when you're paying them as kind of a call firefighter or call EMT or whatever, it's increasingly hard to get people to do this. There's an exceptional book, long but exceptional, called Bowling Alone, which points out that there's actually more people, which surprised me, bowling in the United States on an annual basis than were in the 1950s, which makes zero sense to me, right, when you think about it. But there's like 10% of those people are bowling in leagues anymore. People going out with their family, they're bowling on a Saturday, they're taking the kids to a birthday party, they're going bowling, whatever. So their numbers are up, but people are not doing things socially. And part of a successful volunteer fire agency is that social, it's part of the social aspect. It's having the time within a community for people to dedicate to those kinds of things. And that is an increasing challenge. It is not something that you've done wrong as a community. It is not something that you've done wrong here in the Commonwealth. It's a problem everywhere. And that's why I started out by saying this model is increasingly common around the United States. You've historically, over the past several years, prior to either the chief or the town administrator who were sitting here in the room, prior to either one of them getting here, in fact, probably prior to many of you being on the board, decisions were made to start moving towards a higher level of service by providing for paramedic coverage here within the town, and in part by doing that by adding staff that were here during dedicated chunks of time during the day. You're now pursuing, as part of that original plan, the idea of expanding that to 16 or maybe an hour more of coverage every single day, again addressing when the calls are most likely to occur, which unfortunately coincides with when it's most difficult to get people to show up as volunteers and call firefighters and paramedics. One of the things that we do think is that if this level of service is something that you want, despite the fact that, I'll talk about it in a minute, we think there's a couple different ways of getting there, they're still going to cost you money. I mean, I can't tell you to vote yes or no on a Prop 2.5 override, but I can say that if you want to provide for additional coverage and your finances are the way that I've been told they are, and that means you need a Prop 2.5 override to get there, if you want 16 hours of coverage, whether you do it by essentially contracting individually with people to come in and work for you for 20 or 40 or 80 or whatever hours a month, that keeps them just below that sort of permanent part-time employee threshold, or whether you do it the other way, which I'll talk about in a second, you need that, you're going to need that money. It's not going to change the cost of it that dramatically, I don't think. So what am I talking about? So if the Prop 2.5 override fails, you'll be no different than you are today, right? You'll be providing coverage from 8 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon, and then relying on call people to make up the difference. Passage would allow you to move to hiring additional people or expanding the use of those hours to 16 hours a day instead of 8 or 9, and sort of expanding on the model that you've already got going, right? A lot of these things that it mentions were set in motion. You're just sort of, you're riding along on a train track at this point, and this is just the next stop. Is, okay, do we take it from 8 to 16? Are we ever going to need to have 24? If we don't, what are we going to do about those 8 hours? And then you get funny things where it's, okay, well, we know we've got somebody coming at 8, but is somebody going to go take a call at 6 o'clock in the morning if that means they're going to end up in Holyoke at a hospital, and now they got to leave their house for work at 7:30, but they're in Holyoke at 8:30? I mean, those are the real life challenges. Or am I going to go take a call at 6 o'clock? I got to coach my kids t-ball down here right now at 6 o'clock. There's 100 people in this little park down here, and I wouldn't go near any of them because they're all swinging bats around and nobody's looking at what they're doing. It gets more frightening when they get bigger, but they're pretty scary looking right now. I've coached t-ball. It's not safe. It's dangerous, for adults in particular. It's scary. And they hit you in the knees, fortunately, because none of them are very big, but still. So one of the options that you have would be to develop some kind of an RFP that says to your neighbors who have full-time fire departments, hi, we'd like to hire you to put people in this station for this many hours a day. This is what we can afford. And we'd like to make you our primary responder for, you can write it any way you want to. Hey, we want people in here 16 hours a day, and in those other 8 hours a day, we want you to be our primary ambulance provider and our primary first due fire unit, backed up by our call people. Or, hey, we want somebody to be our primary, but we're willing to divide the town into halves or quarters or thirds or whatever, and we'll work with, 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 of you to cover the town during the hours that we don't have somebody sitting here. I mean, if I were you, if you were going to do this, I'd try to write it in such a way that I'm a big believer in allowing the contractor to be as creative as they want to be, and not saying we want this and this and this and this and this and that. You're not buying paper. You're looking for service. Define the service, define the philosophy, and let people tell you how they're going to do it and how they're going to meet your objectives in terms of response time coverage and second call coverage or whatever it is that you want to set out there. I'd probably hire somebody to help me write the RFP, frankly. How you manage that, so let's say you went down that line, how you manage that becomes another question, right? Communities that do that would retain a fire chief and say, okay, you're here to do inspections, you're here to make sure that our contractor is doing what they're supposed to do, you're here to make sure, essentially, instead of contracting with 40 individuals to provide the service that you're getting today, you contract with one entity and tell them, I don't care that everybody is sick, you contract with me to put 2 people in this building. Make it happen. Shut down one of your own ambulances, I don't care, but somebody's going to be here, right? And have somebody in-house who manages that for you and continues to do the inspections and the plan review and work with builders and everything else that needs to happen to make sure that life safety issues are being addressed. You could contract all of that out, but to me, at some point, you've crossed that threshold of where have we lost too much control? And to me, I'd want to keep the proactive side of that control first and foremost, right? The making sure things are being done beforehand the way we want them done, and that things look the way we want them to look, and that fire trucks can get into the buildings that we're going to allow people to build, all that stuff. And sort of own that. And then say, well, we're going to go hire labor, and you could go to a temp agency, which you can't do for this kind of a service, but essentially you're looking at your neighboring communities and saying, we want, and we know what we're getting, right? We're getting one of your paramedics and EMTs. Whether you do it with your own assets or whether you do it with theirs is an open question. You could ask them to tell you, would you rather use your own ambulances or do you want to use ours? We have a building. At some point, that building would be a challenge. If I were going to bid on that, I would, one of the challenges from my perspective would be the suitability of that building for extended operations. If I was going to put somebody in that building for 16 hours a day, I'd want different things in that building. I'd want it bigger, for example. Not necessarily someplace for people to sleep, but at least someplace for people to sit down that isn't also the office, that isn't also the pathway to the bathroom, that isn't also the only way to get to the, I mean, it's a multiply adapted building, which is serving a purpose that no one could possibly have conceived of when that thing got built. I'm sure by a bunch of volunteers 120 years ago. But that's an option for you. Frankly, this is one of those times that I've said this actually both to the town administrator and to the chief. It would shock you how many times I've been hired to do a fire station location study. You show up in a city. I did this in Illinois. I showed up in a village in Illinois that had 5 fire stations. 4 of them had been renovated or built in the 5 years preceding the day that they hired us to come there and do the work. They said, we want a fire station location study. I said, really? What are we allowed to look at? Well, you're allowed to look at where we put anything. I said, really? So the station you just spent $4 million renovating, we're allowed to tell you that that is absolutely in the wrong place. No. Okay. Well, what about this one over here you just built for $11 million with a police station on the side of it? What if that's in the wrong place? Yeah, we don't really want to know that either. They had one that they wanted to move. It was sat in the middle of downtown. It was a wicked nice street and then had this fire station in the middle of it, which was sort of cool like 100 years ago, but now it's just in the way for some big development they wanted to do. And really what they wanted was somebody to come in and tell them that it was okay to move it into the backside of that lot and go out on a different street. but they put out a fire station location study. So here we are. In some ways, I wish this had been done like 5 years ago, so that we could have come in and said, there's not really been a lot of, you guys are talking about doing this, but there's not really been a lot of analysis that's gone into it. You're running like a call and a half, maybe 2 a day. It's a big investment to be talking about making for a couple calls. And if you really want to do that, I'm not sure you want to suddenly gear up and be in the business of having, even though they're part-time employees, multiples of the number of employees you have in your police department to deliver a couple guys on duty 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? I mean, to me, ultimately, this should have been a contract for service with one of your neighbors that you should have entered into years ago with the option to expand the hours if you came up with the funding to expand the hours or the need. But you're here now, and so I bring it up because if I didn't bring it up, I'd be derelict in what it is that you contracted with me to do. But I can't just say, yeah, you guys should go out and contract for service and not acknowledge the fact that you've got individuals who've gone out and paid on their own to become paramedics because they live in the community and they want to be available at night to be paramedic responders on call.
So that aside, would you recommend we contract out? Is that what you're saying?
I would have. I mean, to me, I'd contract as a labor pool. I'd look at it as essentially, we want this level of service and we want you to provide the people in these seats during these times. And recognizing a lot of these are, it's going to be overtime shift for these people, essentially. It's second job, but you're giving the money to them and they're paying their people. It's a second shift. So do you allow them to work 2 shifts in a row and give them an hour to get from Westfield to here? I mean, it takes 10 minutes, but to make that transition and get breakfast. And it addresses a lot of things like whose bunker gear do they wear? I mean, you'd have to think about that. Whose SCBAs do they use? Whose apparatus do they use? Do you allow them to take that unit out of town if they've got a mass casualty incident someplace? If there's a crash at the airport, is your unit allowed to just go without being called for mutual aid? Is it just part of that response? I mean, ultimately, it probably should be. Ultimately, nobody should really care where that unit came from if you've got that kind of a thing going on.
Have you been involved with those RFPs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on both sides. So helping people structure them and helping people look at them from okay, we've been in this for 5 years. We thought we were getting into this, but we're getting this. Should we renegotiate? Scottsdale, Arizona, a city of 250,000 people, until, I'm doing math off of a when somebody I know died, so off of, I worked on a project with a guy, and like a week after we finished, he got pancreatic cancer and was dead like a month later. And the project we worked on was Scottsdale. It was looking at, they would look every 5 years. They were a rural metro contract city. They provided everything, fire, EMS, and in fact, for most of the area around Phoenix at that point, rural metro was the provider. So it would say City of Scottsdale on the truck, but it was a private company staffing the rigs. And they did that for a long time until rural metro stock went from like $30 to 30 cents. And they had people, they had fully invested their pension plan, rural metro had, in rural metro stock, which made the stock go up, of course, but also made it worth nothing to these guys who'd been firefighters in Scottsdale for the past 25 years, who all of a sudden were going to retire with $10,000 instead of the $2 million or whatever that they thought they were going to have. So Scottsdale took over at that point.
Just to clarify, are you talking about if you were here 5 years ago, would you do the contracting out for fire, ambulance, or both?
Everything.
Everything.
I don't know how in a community of this size, if you've got 2 people sitting there, I don't know how you distinguish it.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, for both.
Okay.
Now, could you do something different? One of the things I was hinting at was, let's say you wanted to pay somebody to have staff sitting here for 16 hours a day, and the other 8, you were going to enter into a different kind of arrangement, where you said, okay, community which staffs our station, we're looking to you at night as our primary ambulance provider townwide. But maybe as one way of getting everybody comfortable with the way that we get response times, we pay community, I don't know, to the west. I don't care about who does this, so I'll just say the community that way we'll pay you 10 grand a year to be our nighttime first responder backing up whoever's ambulance. Or we'll pay you to be the ambulance guy, and we'll pay you to be the engine company coming in to be backup. Because right now, and I mean, there's union issues that some of these communities would have to get over in terms of bidding on a project like this, and in terms of how they'd be comfortable with you staffing a unit like this, which might or might not be at variance with how you're trying to do it right now. I mean, there's issues out there that any potential bidder would have to deal with, both internally as well as the external piece of it. So. I remembered wrong. Oh no, it's going in the other direction. Doesn't seem to care which direction I... Okay. So, sort of to wrap up, and then I'm happy to stand here and talk about this as long as you'd like to, but the approach that you're taking is common, the service levels that you're trying to provide, the sort of partial day coverage and relying on call and volunteer at night, increasingly common, particularly, as I mentioned earlier, as you start losing the ability to attract significant quantities of volunteers. If you want to provide a higher level of service at paramedic level or advanced life support level, you're gonna end up relying on paid people. Those are difficult. That's a difficult certification to get somebody to keep and then say, oh, thank you for volunteering. Because it takes time to get, it's expensive to get, it takes time to maintain. The CEs are expensive to get and maintain. And frankly, you want them working in a busy place as a paramedic, because one of the real challenges, and this is true even in places like Fort Lauderdale, which has 100% of its firefighters are paramedics, literally 100% of them. One of the real challenges is the engine company shows up at your house with the ambulances a few minutes behind, because they're the busiest ambulances in the United States. And you have 3 victims in the house, and the driver, the captain, and the backseat firefighter are all technically paramedics. But the captain and the driver haven't really touched a patient in 2 years. Because the backseat, I mean, that's the way it works, right? So the junior guys they work on the ambulance half the time also. They have the skills, but there are certain skills that even if you do them in CEs, you just lose them if you don't do them. So intubation for somebody who's been shot or is having a heart attack or has been in a car accident or something like that, there's been studies that show that you have to do 100 of those in a field or sort of preoperative setting, basically under pressure, to maintain a high level of proficiency and a likelihood that you can do it the first time you try to do it.
100 per year?
100 per year.
Wow.
So if you're Plano or you're Fort Lauderdale, where they've made these enormous investments in having paramedics, what they've found is that the theory of having everybody be a paramedic is kind of like the theory if I like ice cream, a little is great, and you should just keep giving me ice cream. At some point, it's just too much ice cream. So if you're here, where you're distant from a hospital and distant from emergent medical care, or if you're out on the pike, those communities need paramedics, but are oftentimes least able to afford them. Whereas Cambridge is swimming in paramedics, or Fort Lauderdale is a great example, 250,000 person city, 180,000 person city now, 2 level 1 trauma centers, 1 on either side of town, 100% paramedic coverage out of 12 fire stations. I mean, you'd be better off throwing somebody in the back of a motorcycle, frankly, and just driving them to your trauma center, rather than letting a paramedic play doctor at the scene, which is often what happens. That's another thing they find is what will happen in those environments. Here, it could be the difference between life and death for somebody. There, it's probably slowing down an even higher level of treatment that they could have gotten if you just put them in the trauma center quickly. One of the things I mentioned earlier is that you sort of jumped into this, but I'm not sure, given the data that's available even now, just sort of the way it's been captured and the systems that are in place in town, that there was a whole lot of analysis done about what this was going to cost and where you were going to go. And I asked for where's the plan? And there has been no plan. And there's been no plan since prior to either one of these two getting here. This isn't their fault. This is something that's just, I think, as often happens in small communities, there was a perceived need, people felt like it should happen, we started to move in that direction, all of a sudden it's getting really expensive, and now people want to know where the plan is. Which is the same thing that I mentioned about the contracting out for service. There's some small changes you can make in the way you report things. I think it would make you guys a little more comfortable. I think there are some small operational changes that would make me more comfortable, at least as a professional observer of this stuff, and it would probably reduce some small chances of some error occurring. It would make things a little more efficient. And then, I mean, the last most critical thing is if you intend to continue enhancing the level of service that you're providing to the community, that's going to cost you more money, period. Whether you do it by contracting with lots of individuals or whether you do it by contracting with one entity and hiring them to kind of take this problem off your hands, the staffing problem off your hands, makes no difference. If I were going to bid for this service, I would say, okay, well, it's going to take 2 guys and they cost me an average of this much, and how many do you want? Oh, it's like a menu. You know, you want 1 order of fries or you want 10? I got 5 boys. I don't get a discount because I've ordered my 100th chicken nugget when I walk into seriously 100, when I walk into a McDonald's. They're going to eat them all, but nobody gives me a price break for doing it. I wouldn't give you a price break for doing it either. It might be a little less expensive because some of the administrative things that are being handled, that you're having to pay to have handled by part-time staff right now, some of those might go away and just get absorbed by the entity. But we're talking about, you know, $10,000 or $20,000 worth of stuff, not, hey, this is the way we're going to save $200,000 and get this done for what we're spending today. I just don't think it would work that way. So, any questions?
I guess my question is, if you're sitting here, you're saying, okay, should we spend the extra money for the second shift and continue the way we're going, or should we contract out? Just an honest opinion, and why?
Okay, so my guess is that the dollar amount is pretty much the same. So the first big question is, do we as a community, do we as the representative, the elected executive representative of this community, think that we should go tell our legislature, town meeting, that we believe that we should spend more money to get this level of service? I mean, based on the conversations that I've had with the chief, based on the data that's available, you have instances right now where you are not providing the level of service that you say as a community, that you're telling the community that you've worked with this Commonwealth to provide, you're not doing it. So if you take that, if you take that set of decisions, some of which were made by members of this board right now, and many of you weren't here when those decisions were initiated, but I think that's sort of the logical direction for these things to be going. How you go about doing it, from my perspective, if you came to me 5 years ago and said, okay, we want to do this, and over the next 3 years, we want to spool up to having 8 hours of coverage, and then the next 3 to 6 years, we want to get to 16, and then we want to take a breath and like figure out what's going on, and do we go all night or not, or whatever. How should we do that? I would have told you to put out an RFP and see if you could get anybody to bid on it. And frankly, you could do that concurrently with continuing to do things the way you're doing it right now. And you could say, okay, well, we're going to put out this RFP, we're soliciting bids. This would be for service for a X year contract, whatever your lawyer tells you you can get away with signing. The longer you sign, probably the better your pricing is going to be. And, you know, we want the ability to modify what we want in terms of level of service, an annual redefine, that kind of a thing, and subject to funding and all the stuff that you have to put in every contract as a municipal entity. And look and see if you get somebody to bid on it starting on, you know, September 1st, 2017 or something like that. And see what you can get. You might get nothing. I mean, there is some risk that while the mayor or city manager or town manager or whoever might say, wow, that's a great idea, and the fire chief might, in some community, might say, well, that's a great idea. You may have a union president that says, over my dead body. And therein lies the conversation that has to happen in that community before they even got around to putting together a bid. And I can't possibly guess what they what they would do. I give you the range of options about what they would do, but I don't know which any of them might do.
Other questions? Jackie, do you have any questions? It's a lot to absorb.
It is, and I mentioned to Heather, if you guys want to have a workshop and talk about this stuff, or you want to have me come back and answer questions, it's a couple hours, it's not that big a deal. I could convince my mother to buy me dinner again.
What does it mean for the staff that's there now if we contract out?
Yeah. So for some of them, depending on which department they worked for, it would mean nothing. Presumably, there's several logical candidates, right, that concurrent border with you and have full-time fire departments and are providing you, they're your labor source now. So for many of those people who are here, particularly during the day, it wouldn't mean much if their entity won. If it didn't, they'll have to, in all likelihood, go look for a different second job working as a paramedic someplace else. For the call firefighters, the reality is you'd have a difficult time dealing with much besides a car accident or a car fire or a dumpster fire or a small detached garage fire with 2 people and just sort of calling it a day. You're relying on other people coming in anyway. You're reliant upon call people to come and help on those kinds of events. So I've certainly seen, you're in a hybrid system now. There's, as I keep trying to stress, that the idea of the contract is how you're contracting for your labor during the staffed pieces. It's with one or with, lots of individuals. I don't think that it would need to impact the call personnel at all, frankly. You could, the community I live in, it grew up in, it doesn't. There's still a pretty vibrant pancake breakfast to be found in 3 of the 5 anyway.
Okay. Other questions? Does the board want to make any decisions about this tonight, or do you need some time to soak it all in?
Definitely time to soak it all in.
Okay.
Now, where's your mom from?
I grew up in Castleton, New York, which is, I grew up about 3 miles north of the Berkshire Extension Bridge as it crosses the Hudson, literally right on the water.
And she's from there?
Yes.
So a few hours away.
Hour and 20 for her, and
Here?
yeah, it's not that bad a ride. It's straight Pike and then up 91. It's not that bad a ride. The worst is that exit 2 to 3 gap. That's the
30-mile gap?
That's the killer.
Yeah.
It's nothing. You're not missing anything by not being able to get off out there anyway.
No, it tends, you get to fall asleep along the way.
Yes. Yes.
All right, so we'll take some time to think about this, and
Beautiful.
then if we have questions or need you back, we'll
Yeah.
get in touch with Heather.
Yeah,
and
please
she can-
do.
Okay.
Super.
Very good.
Thank you, guys.
so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
You're very welcome.
We're going to move to Randall. Hey, Randall, come on up. Randall's from the Highway Department. We asked him at our last meeting to come because we had some questions we wanted to talk about. So you should have a list on your agenda of things we had questions about. Chapter 90 funds, we were talking about, refresh my memory. We were talking with Vicki and Heather about a meeting you went to with Heather exploring funds, and we said,
That was
should we
complete-
be exploring this, or should we be trying to figure out how to spend the money we already have? Does that sound about right? And so
You
we-
might be referring to Complete Streets.
Nope. Maybe, same thing?
It is money that the state has available. However, they would like the town to pass a bylaw, which the town agrees to do X, Y, and Z. I think Heather has a list of the things that the town would have to agree to. And there's a limited amount of money. I think the conclusion Heather and I both came to was if we had a particular project that money could be used on, it would be advantageous for us to go after it. But there aren't any projects right now that are applicable for us. Things like
Under the
adding
Complete
bike.
Streets project?
Yeah, you're adding bike trails, that's the biggest one. Or bike lanes, changing the lanes in your roads to make them more pedestrian or multi-user friendly, I think is the term they use. Trying to think of some of the other things that were applicable. If we were doing a Chapter 90 project, and you had a gap in your sidewalk, like say, a good example might be East Street, but there's no sidewalks on it right now anyway. But
Would
if
it
you
apply
had,
to the sidewalk gap where the cemetery is?
yeah, pardon me?
The sidewalk gap where the cemetery is? People have expressed concern about that gap.
I guess we'd have to look at it if it's worth, that might be something we just try and fit into the town budget, or maybe go after Chapter 90 funds for that.
So I guess the concerns that
Doing
we
all
had at
this
that
other
point-
stuff to get whatever monetary amount that, dollar amount that might be.
So
I don't know if it's worth it.
I guess we were questioning, is it worth our time to go after the money in this Complete Streets program when we have so much money sitting in Chapter 90? Should we be better utilizing our time to figure out how to spend that money first?
I have an opinion, but I've also
Here.
I don't think so at this time, but that could change depending on if we see a project that looks like it's worth it, going for it. As far as the Chapter 90 funds we have currently, I think we've been reimbursed for this one, but last year we paved Cottage Ave, Walcott Road, Rattle Hill, and a portion of Gilbert. I have approved right now, it'll be done as soon as they schedule it, Manhan Road and Delisle Road. That's $73,000. I had to get all of my estimates into Hampshire Council of Governments, and you have to name any projects that you want to use Chapter 90 on, so I tried to get ambitious, and who knows if I'll be able to get to these or all these or not, but this is a list of things that are on the bid anyway. Pave Birchwood, Lead Mine Road, Russellville Road, Fomer Road from Route 10 to Russellville, and a badly degraded section near the reservoir. Brickyard Road from Gilbert to Westfield Town Line. Fomer and portions of Russellville will have to be milled prior to paving. And that work would be about $488,685. That's my estimate. Chip sealing, I'd like to do that on Pomeroy Meadow Road, Montgomery Road, Cold Spring Road, County Road South, and Glendale Road from Pomeroy Meadow to the Easthampton Town Line. That'd be $199,000. Work on gravel roads, $2,000 to $3,000. We were approved for Chapter 90 funds to get the appraisal on the two properties we need temporary easements from for safe routes to school. That was $8,250. We have to purchase an asphalt roller and a trailer because ours burned up a couple of years ago. I don't know if you remember that. I've got one quote for the asphalt roller at $45,430, and I have an estimate for the trailer, $5,000 to $6,000. So I believe we have $900,000 available, and that work right there is $824,124. Like I said, if we get it all scheduled, all approved from the state, it's going to be a busy construction year, but
Okay.
The equipment goes under Chapter 90 also?
road building equipment can go under Chapter 90, these two particular things in particular,
So that's positive.
okay?
I don't know what this volunteer recognition refers to, do you?
Well, I had a scout from Troop 210 contact me, and he wanted to do he's trying to go for his Eagle Scout, and he needed an 8-hour service project and wanted to clean up trash along town roads. I provided it with some garbage picker-uppers, reflective vests. His dad was with him, or mom was with him at all times, and they cleaned up. I tried to get all the roads he listed. It was pretty, they did a lot of them in the time. County South, Pomeroy Meadow, and Route 10 to like High Street, and I think he came down the hill where there were sidewalks, but it's good. Oh, sorry, his name was Max McFadden.
Oh, Max McFadden.
Yeah.
What a nice boy he is.
So I just wanted to, some good news in town,
That's very nice.
people volunteering.
Good.
Erosion concerns. So Charlie had contacted me about the town-owned land in between Hillside Meadow Drive and Gun Road.
I put it up on the screen. if they
Can
do
you
it.
see without the light on your paper, if I shut the light off?
Yeah,
Can you still see?
yeah. There are two culverts that go under the road. I don't know if you can see them, but there's trees growing out of both of them. And I met with Ken Crochier from Mass DOT to go over the concerns I believe Mr. Fletcher brought to Charlie about the culverts. I guess in speaking with him, their position is that the erosion is not egregious, like it's not really bad, and it's so far off the road out of the town, out of the state right-of-way, that they're not really going to address the erosion. They will clean out the culverts and remove the trees that are growing in them, but he said basically it's a culvert that transfers runoff from one side of the road to the other. It's not their problem, I guess.
Do you know if the trees are causing the erosion, and once they clear the trees, it will,
It doesn't look like it, and in fact, the outfalls of the culverts are at a, how do you say this? There's a plunge pool, and then it's high elevation, so the water would have to get to that level to run over and sheet flow across the field.
that's quite a bit then.
If I may, Randall,
Yeah, go ahead, Charlie.
if you look at the map, you see where the hand is? The water's flowing in this direction, and
Yes.
Route 10 is basically acting as a dam, and there's basically a culvert underneath here, and the erosion is here. What's happening is all this field's water sheeting across, hitting Route 10, and then migrating through the culvert, and then across this area and washing out here. The same thing is happening with a culvert up in this area to a drainage area here. But basically, it's water coming from this way across Route 10.
That's the only update I had.
Mr. Fletcher, I really want to hear what you have to say, but would you mind coming to the podium so those at home could hear you? Sorry. Otherwise, no one can hear you. That's okay.
Up where you see the hand now, you have water coming across the next field up from Hillside Meadows. All the houses up along the top of that ridge, all of that water comes across that field. When those houses were built, there was supposed to be a retention basin. You will see it, but there's never any water in it at the bottom of Hillside Meadows. It was agreed that no water from those houses would come across like it does right now. And that is one of the biggest parcels of erosion, is the water coming from that upper pipe. And that area has been repaired a number of times since I've been in town, and it just keeps right on washing out.
Okay. So what do we do about that?
Well, there's actually 3 pipes. The one that's furthest down, we started asking about replacing that pipe in the late 90s. I crawled into the end of the pipe. The bottom of the pipe is completely rotted out. There is a sinkhole in the middle of our field, about where that hand is, that was caused by the pipe. We filled in the sinkhole twice, and it washes right back out again. We did have an opportunity to change that pipe back when the tires were removed, and it was turned down. Why it was turned down, I can't answer that.
What's the cost to repair a pipe or
The
replace a pipe?
last cost that I got just on the pipe alone was $5,000.
Down
It's
there.
about 300 feet long, it's 24 inches in diameter. I'm sure at this point in the game, it would probably be a $10,000 project, minimum.
Liz, man.
Probably Randall could probably answer that better than I could.
Okay. Charlie?
Randall, you want to come up to the podium too? It's my understanding is there's drainage coming down from the center of, like where the bank is and the rest of that. Then there's a drainage pipe that cuts across like this There is a sinkhole developing here, and it comes across to where the stand of trees is. Town property is from where that hand is on the map, all the way to here. This presently is owned by the town of Southampton.
Is this the piece of property, Mr. Fletcher, that we talked about a couple of years ago? Same piece of property?
It was originally part of the farm. There's been a lot of discussion about it, which my wife has the liberty of finding all the information on it. It was originally stated before the selectmen that the land had been removed from the ag preservation program. And we had a discussion in the Board of Health recently about it. The print in this does state that when the ag preservation was put on the farm back in 81 and 82, that it covered the entire farm, which was 160 acres. What they were looking for was a breakdown. They thought it would be individual parcels, but it was not. It was, and it clearly states it, the APR covers the entire farm. At no point was it ever removed. There was talk that it was removed when the tire project went on. There's nothing at the Registry of Deeds. There's nothing where it was ever removed. It's always been in place. It states it in the paperwork that we have.
So that paperwork makes that land the farms?
It was originally the farms. It's still protected under the agricultural preservation. And it was my hope that I could come before you to see if we could rejoin it to the farm so that I could possibly go to USDA to look into grant money to try to fix. This is not the only place that there's erosion. This is the erosion up front, but all the way along my land, there's washouts, continual washouts all the way along there.
Okay. Okay.
You have basically, what I'm hearing is you got two issues here. One is the erosion issue, and the other one is the land issue of transfer, taking, whatever you want to call it.
What was the reason that, when we talked about this, the reason that the land couldn't be joined back with the farm?
Originally, the land was taken to obtain the grant to clean up the tires.
Okay,
I was told that after the project was completed, there was a period of time which the town had to retain ownership of the land. That time has come and gone. Then, the last time I was before the selectmen in 2010 and got absolutely nowhere. And it was then told that the land was no longer in the APR program, that it would never be rejoined to the farm, and that it had been removed, and the person who stated it said that they knew it for fact. And we looked and looked and looked and could find nothing.
okay.
And I went to the state and I asked them. And I don't hear any reason why it couldn't go back to the farm. It wasn't like the town only bought it for $1.
Mhm.
I'm more than willing to pay the town back the $1.
If I might jump in.
Please.
I was here to talk about the erosion, but I've got some reports in investigating it.
Yeah.
I think the town spent quite a bit of money cleaning up that tire dump. And I believe that's why the land was it taken? I don't know. I don't know the history of it.
It was not town money, though. It wasn't
It's grant money.
It was from a community action grant, I believe. It was never from taxpayer money from town taxpayers. There was two pods of money, one that was taken out of the bankruptcy court when they filed bankruptcy, and the other one was money that they got from a grant. And
Okay.
they obtained the grant by owning the land.
Okay,
So it wasn't like it was,
okay. So we have some researching to do to get us up to speed, obviously. Did you have something, Ron?
No, I just say we should research it and make sure.
Yeah, to look into it, because I know that you're talking about, oh, Mrs. Ahart, please come to the podium. I had thought we had talked about this after, at least after 2013 again, though. It was right when I got on the board, and I remember having a conversation, it was brief, a brief conversation, but I thought it was in regards to the same thing. Maybe I'm wrong.
my only feeling on this is that it's right in the middle, I won't say in the exact middle, but it's part of the farm.
Right,
It does affect me.
yeah,
I don't feel that when the town, if you read the language of the cleanup of the tires, all it whole cleanup process was to stabilize this area.
No.
And I made this statement and I was told I did not know what I was talking about. And I said, the tires are the problem, but they're not the problem. The water was always the problem.
Okay.
And it was my feeling that more should have been done when the cleanup took place to try to solve the water problem. We are at the bottom of the hill, and that's never going to change. And everything that's been done around us has been more water and more water and more water. And we have had people come in and say, you're not getting any more or any less than you did before, and that's just not true.
Okay. Mrs. Ahart?
I'm not a total expert on agricultural preservation restrictions, but I've worked with enough of them here in town. The only way that that can be taken out is by an act of our state legislature. And they, in my understanding, they have never voted yes on any. So whoever told them that the APR was gone, that
Misspoke.
absolutely misspoke, because we looked into this for another reason. And it takes many, many
They've never
steps.
done one yet.
And they have never let one change yet, even under pressure by some of the more affluent people in the eastern part of the state.
So there is some thought that we could rejoin this land to a farm, based on that conversation. Okay.
We brought a copy of the APR from
Okay.
the sale to the farm, and that 8.4 acres was sold to the town for $1. So this is been recorded, and you'll see it's all strips are copy.
Okay.
It has a book and page.
Files.
It says right in it, 2 APRs.
Just before then, yeah.
Okay. So aside from the erosion, can we look into this, Heather, a little more? If the board, go ahead, Charlie.
I think the first thing you need to do is see who's got title to this piece of property, and if there's any deed restrictions, that's what the APR is. That's the first step.
Well, at least open the conversation again, I guess is my point.
I
And do all
personally,
of that.
I personally don't have a problem with the land going back to them, or
Right.
going to that farm. It shouldn't say back to them because they didn't own the farm back then. But I don't see any retaining ownership by the town is doing the town any good one way or the other.
Right.
But the first thing you need to do is get the deed title researched and find out if there's any deed restrictions on this parcel. And,
Do you want to make that motion?
well, I want to
Keep
say,
going,
I want
okay.
to also say that I also own APR land, and I also have worked in other communities where the APR was released because of contamination on the farms. So I have seen that the deeds changed because of that.
All right, so there's a lot of conversation that has to happen.
There's a-
But
this is a
opening
huge-
it- But opening it is not.
I
the
moved
worst
that,
thing could
that
happen.
we authorize the town administrator to begin the preliminary to review the title and deed restrictions on that parcel.
If, is there a second for discussion?
Second
Okay,
discussion.
go ahead.
Want the documents.
I was going to say, I think Mr. Fletcher has.
Are they copies?
Well, we want to verify everything at the
One
registry.
thing's
You know,
disappeared.
rather than just look at it.
We have a copy of the final.
It's okay. You know what I'm saying.
Why don't you guys read that, because I'm not really sure what I'm looking at.
Well, we can look at it, but it's a deed by looking at it.
Heather wants to chime in.
Go ahead, Heather.
I just want to make sure the board's aware, so we did receive an email earlier on this subject with regards to the tire prospect of this, I believe, from the Board of Health Director. Didn't folks see
I didn't
the
open my email. No.
Yes, but they're only talking about the tire situation. We're actually looking at the ownership of the property.
Okay. So they're not tied together, or they are?
Well, eventually they will be,
Okay.
but right now, it appears there's a discussion of who has clear ownership and who has deed restrictions.
Okay.
So let's find out, just make sure that we've been led to believe the town owns this, and we've been led to believe that the APR restriction has been taken off the land. We're also being told that that's not the case, so I'd much rather have a clean deed and a clean title to this thing, so we know what we're talking about.
I mean, you can research that online in the registry.
I am
mean,
not
if-
going to research anything.
No, she can.
Okay.
So there's a motion on the floor and a second to have the town administrator research the deed.
Deed and the APR.
Is there any other discussion about that motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
The next issue is the erosion concerns, but is that what the Board of Health is discussing, Heather, the erosion?
I think Charlie.
Charlie?
I don't remember I remember reading the email, but I don't remember the substance of the email, but basically it had to do with, is the erosion been corrected? There is still funding in their account on that grant that's available to do more correcting.
In
But we-
whose grant?
The Board of Health's grant, or town grant, for the original process.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons we need the Board of Health to come to one of the selectmen's meetings, so that we can go back and forth and have a better understanding of what's going on.
So at this point, there's not much else we can do about the erosion problem other than get in touch with the Board of Health?
Right, they have funding sitting in there, so.
Okay. What else do we need Randall for, or the Fletchers, anything? Mr. and Mrs. Fletcher, do you have any other issues you'd like to discuss while you're here, or things we need to know?
I know Charlie had asked at the Board of Health meeting, did you want to see the
This is the final report.
final report, the compliance? Because there was a folder, a file on this whole thing that.
What, my personal opinion, I would like to see a clean deed with any restrictions that are on it. Is it owned by the town, or what? All right?
This is on the entire project itself.
Right, and then once we get past that, then that should be the Board of Health dealing with their grant money about the tire dump.
See, the money that they have left over is not grant money. The money they have left over was bankruptcy money.
You need to go to that microphone.
Sorry, nobody can hear you at home if you're not there.
I like that pause when I did that to you.
Sorry. The money that is left is not grant money. The grant money was used. There was a substantial amount of bankruptcy money that was left. There is a lot of unanswered questions about the money, the file, and what happened to the money.
Where should bankruptcy money go, generally? Where does it,
The bankruptcy money was taken originally before the grant was, and then there was, they said, there's a sizable gap here because they didn't know what it was going to take to clean it up. When they got the grant money, the bankruptcy money kind of sat to the side. When it was all done, the bankruptcy money was still there.
and it's still there now?
Some of it is. The file disappeared, and I know this is going to sound a little strange, but the Fowles, Mr. and Mrs. Fowles' daughter, had some questions about the procedure. And she came before the select board, and they basically told her they weren't answering her questions. And there was a significant portion of money and the file, and they're gone. And that was a question at the Board of Health meeting was, where did it go?
When was that? When did that happen?
Ooh, 10 years, 15 years?
I know what I saw, and I know that Christine Fowles, I'm sure she still has it. She had, it was before the accountant that you have now. She had hold of an accountant's ledger sheet that showed a series of withdrawals from that account.
Now, who
And-
had the file originally?
The Board of Health had it. It was in the Board of Health's office.
But that also means the town accountant had it. And and you have to appreciate, this is all previous, any of us,
Yes,
The
this
town
is
ac-
back in,
yeah, you know.
between
I think I was still in high
03 and 08.
it makes you responsible.
So I know that she came to me and asked me, and I said, I know nothing about it. But some of the withdrawals are significant. And I tried to catch her when she was home last time to see if she had it, so I could bring it to you. But it's like the file. The file was in a locked drawer, behind a locked door, and it disappeared. After about the time she started asking questions.
Interesting. All right, not really sure what to say about that, other than that's unfortunate. All right. And so, I guess, what do we do about the erosion? Nothing right now?
Well, there's
Wait
a
to
motion
hear-
on
We
the,
did.
Okay.
We all eyed that.
All right, so the erosion at this point in time, I would refer them back to the Board of Health,
Okay.
because they're the ones with the funding right now to deal with erosion for the tire dump.
Okay.
Because the erosion, if I'm getting this right, is the edges of the tire dome.
So then we have the policy needed for the Department of Public Works work on the state road. Do you know anything about that?
Yes.
That's the only way the town could buy it.
Ready?
So, about 2 weeks ago, we were called out by police dispatch to address a tree that had fallen into Route 10. Dispatch had attempted to contact Mass DOT maintenance and was unable to do so. Highway staff had been called out for trees on town roads.
Mr. Keener, Mrs. Ahart and Mr. Keener, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're having a hard time hearing.
Would you like to come up to the podium?
No,
Would you like to come to the podium?
no, it's okay, let's move. So we're,
Open
go
time
ahead.
to
So
the
there
public.
was a tree that fell on Route 10.
Yeah, so other trees in town went down, so while my staff was out, they cleared it out of Route 10. We ultimately ended up cleaning up the whole thing because it was still across the sidewalk. And then in the same week, we were called out to put some sand down on a hydraulic spill on Route 10. So my understanding was that the town highway department wasn't supposed to take care of anything on Route 10. That's complete state
Okay,
jurisdiction. So I want to make sure
so you're in
that,
trouble now that you did that?
I don't know, I want to make sure that the select board is fine with me spending town money and taking care of state roads.
Can you ask for
Or-
reimbursement after you do stuff
They
like that?
don't, they won't,
They don't care.
nope. They said they didn't call us out, like, because we're paying for the,
So the alternative would be to wait for them to come?
yeah.
Well, was the tree blocking the road?
I think it was blocking a lane,
All right, well, thanks for cleaning that up.
yeah.
I'm okay
I'm
with
just
it.
looking for
I
a
mean,
policy from the select board.
I mean, if
You
it's
want
a
me to
matter
keep-
of cars passing by and public safety, I would prefer that it got cleaned up and cars were able to pass rather than wait for,
Okay,
but that's just me, there's 4 other members here.
I personally think if you keep doing it, they're going to keep letting you do it.
So you don't want them to?
I would say, no, we need to get the state involved. I mean, obviously, if you got an emergency, if somebody's hurt or something, you can assist, but it's a little inconvenient, but I would want the state to do their responsibilities.
Do they do it in other towns?
Oh, any state highway.
Like if the tree fell on the other side of the road on Westfield side, would Westfield clean it up or would they wait?
It depends on the town/city. I believe Easthampton maintains Route 10 where it goes through the city limits.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong on that, but.
Randall, I look at it this way, if it's an imminent health and safety issue, you do your due diligence to respond in a proper manner.
Right, I second that.
All right. Well, there wasn't a motion, but would someone like to make one to allow Randall to clean up the state highway in the event that
Go ahead, Jackie.
there's a catastrophe that needs to be cleaned up
Go ahead,
immediately?
Jackie.
So moved.
So there's a motion on the floor to allow Randall and the highway department to continue to clean up any state highways in the event that they need to be cleaned up,
In an emergency.
in an emergent
But it
situation.
sounds like at his discretion.
If it's an imminent safety and health concern,
Right.
then the highway superintendent responds at his discretion.
So that your motion?
That's my
All right.
motion.
Now that's your second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Does that work for you,
Thanks,
sir? Does that work for you, sir?
You direct me.
Very
Good
good, sir.
answer. Thanks, Randall.
I'm going no on that.
Let's see, we have everything here on the first page. Okay. We have the Black Birch Vineyard at our last meeting on April 4th. We took up the application for, oh, sorry, open time for the public. I totally skipped it. Open time for the public. Sorry.
That's
I
you.
skipped it by accident, but happy to hear from you. Just let us know who you are, where you live.
It's a new microphone, just speak.
Just
in general.
speak.
Okay. Carl Keener, County Road. I'm not sure, I didn't hear the entire thing. I was watching on
cable?
video. And there seemed to be a question as to APR purchase or relinquishing APR on the Fowles' property. That was absolutely done because the town could not have done the cleanup without relinquishing that portion of the property to APR. I was on the Board of Health at the time, and that was an absolute, had to happen in order for that cleanup to take place.
So if that happened, then how do we know that it happened if it's not at the Board of Registrars or
It
anything?
should be in the Board of Health records, number one.
It should be at the Registry of Deeds.
Pardon?
Should be at the Registry of
It
Deeds.
should be in the Registry of Deeds
'Cause
also.
that should have been,
But I know, and this was something that was required before the town could not undertake cleaning up the tire dump until the town owned the property. And that was an agreement that was made with the Fowleses and the Fletchers to make this happen. And that there's got to be a record of that somewhere. It did take place because the tire dump cleanup could not have happened without that.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to do the research and find out.
Pardon?
We're going to do the
We'll
research
research
and
and
find
figure
out
it
what
out.
happened.
And that all of that should be in the Board of Health files.
Okay.
So I was listening, and I came up specifically for that, because these were things that were agreed to with the Fletchers and the town and the Highway Department. There was a lot of agreements made that, and this is just my opinion, that weren't completed in the Fletchers' interest. And I just feel as though this is something that's necessary to produce the information, because it is there somewhere.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Keener. Mrs. Ahart, feel free to come.
I don't know for sure. I remember all this happening. But an APR follows the land wherever, whoever buys it. If the town bought it for $1, they got the APR. And I don't know how it could be taken off by anyone other than the state legislature.
It went to the state legislature, and they allowed the section for the tire dump to be removed, because it was the only way the tire dump cleanup could proceed.
All right.
Now, subsequent to that, I was no longer on the Board of Health. I don't know what happened after I left, but I do know that this was part of the process, and the tire dump cleanup couldn't have happened without that happening. And it was not all of Fletcher's property, it was only the piece
one little piece.
that had to do with the erosion and the tires, which includes, unfortunately, the area where some of this erosion is taking place.
Okay. So we have some research to do. Charlie?
I agree with Mr. Keener, and I've been involved in other towns, and the APR was removed. It's a simple solution. You just look at the Registry
Yeah,
of
we'll
Deeds.
figure it out.
There's nothing,
Well, go ahead. We'll get it figured out.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I've got a ear infection. I'm having trouble hearing.
I agree with you.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Open time for
first
the
time.
public.
He likes
Speak
that.
now or forever hold your peace. Going once, going twice. Sold. Okay, so we're going to move on. Black Birch Vineyard. At our last meeting on April 4th, the Board of Selectmen took up the application for an alteration of the premises for Black Birch Vineyard to expand their premises into the grass area. A newspaper article was posted and all abutters were notified. Nobody appeared and spoke in opposition to this project. Does the board need any further information, or is there a motion to approve the application by Black Birch Vineyard for an alteration of premises at this time?
I move to grant them their
Is there a second?
request.
Second?
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Heather wants to talk about a method to determine her priorities, our priorities as a board.
In that red folder, Liz, you will find what you guys need to sign.
This is upside down.
I'm very sorry. I will try to get my
We're out of it.
stuff in gear.
Thank you. Sign this. I'm looking for,
So,
Liz, on that last, what are you giving me a weird look? It's
What am
called
I-
the Form 43. It should be
yeah, I
on the top.
have that, but I was
Okay.
talking about your
Yes,
project
that's,
list.
you're not going to see that in the signing page.
Oh, that's what I was looking for.
I'm very sorry. It's not there. I hope it's in here. And if not, we might have to wait till next time. So on everyone's agenda at the last meeting, we had talked about, or we had briefly looked at the concept of having a chart to determine the set of priorities that I'm working on in the office. One of the reasons this came up is working with all the consultants. They had made the recommendation because it seems like every time I come back from a Board of Selectmen meeting, everyone's got these really important projects, and they are really important, but what ends up happening is I go back to the table the next day and I now have 5 more projects on my already 30 projects. So one of the concepts that the consultants had recommended was coming up with a tier of how to determine what my priorities are in order to figure out which large projects get worked on first. Because although things may be very important to individuals and even to groups sometimes, and they are, sometimes it's helpful to have a very objective manner in which to determine which projects take priority.
Mr.
Mr.
Keener?
Keener? We can't hear Heather.
This doesn't
Sorry.
happen, ever. There's
Yes,
something wrong.
usually cuts through.
So that was the plan, to review that this evening in order to make sure everyone's on the same page. I know I had sent it last time, and maybe we can wait another week or so, and maybe it makes sense to wait another week to approve a priority chart, so we have 5 members of the Board of Selectmen on board with it. So, that being the case, if you guys can look at it before next time. And again, we're just looking at essentially, is this a good idea? Does this make sense to work on something like this? One of the benefits to doing this is you'll actually see, certain things go higher up on the priority list because they have legal ramifications, financial ramifications. Someone else is waiting for them, timelines and things like that, that sometimes even everyone gets excited about projects all the time, and what ends up happening is at that very moment in time seems like the most important project at the moment, but when you sit down and apply criteria to it, sometimes it goes a little further down on the chart than
So we'll
the
wait till the
individual
next
looking would
meeting.
think. Yes.
Okay. We have the Public Safety Committee appointments continued until the next meeting. We haven't had any responses to the Public Safety Complex Committee. So at this time, we've only heard back from the Historical Commission with their selection of Don Warren, and we have Charlie and John. So we might have to wait till yet another meeting to see if there's any additional interested parties.
We're not getting any interest from the police and fire department?
I have sent an email. I have mentioned it at a department head meeting. I am still waiting, but I
That
did
makes
hear
it
from
hard to-
Historical.
That makes it
Commission.
hard to sell when the public safety members are not interested in being on the committee.
I will continue
I'm
to
just
try.
I guess-
I can nominate.
Well,
I
it
guess-
just makes it hard to support it.
Yeah,
that's
can
all.
we tell them that if they're not interested in having a committee, then we won't put the project forward and we'll go on something more important?
That's a great
I'm-
We'll
idea.
just drop on the priority list, John.
Well, I mean, really, if we're trying to do something positive for those 2 departments and
Yeah.
nobody has stepped up, then why
I'm
are
sure
we
they-
doing
I'm
that?
sure they are just busy and trying to figure out how to finagle schedules to get someone available, but I will send them another email and remind folks.
Yeah, I would say appoint one by a certain date and then we'll start. If they want to have alternates or something,
That's
that's
okay.
fine. Yeah, we don't have an issue, but give us one to start the committee.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay,
Please.
please. So next, we have the town's choice for legal counsel in fiscal 17. The town of Southampton currently uses Copeland and Page for our town council. There's been some past discussion and inquiry by other firms as to whether we would be interested in looking at opening the bid for counsel to see what our options are. For example, our fiscal 17 rate for Copeland and Page is $180 per hour. Another firm has sent us a letter of interest stating that coverage of Board of Selectmen meetings and all legal work for the town would be $2,500 a month. If we do wish to go out to bid, are we looking for a retained firm with a monthly fee for all work, or are we looking for a per-hour firm?
Well,
I have a question.
Okay.
If we pay $180 per hour to Copeland and Page, on average, how much is that a month? How much do we spend per month now?
We're spending approximately, assuming there's no issues that come up with things that we can't project, about $600.
$600 a month?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We
Okay.
budget 40,000 a year. Right now, we're projected to be under that, but at any moment, if someone files a lawsuit, if there's administrative claims, anything like that that comes up.
Okay. In answer to your question, do we have to go out on hourly or do we go out on a retainer basis? You can do an RFB or RFP, whatever, and ask for both options, and then we can decide after the fact. I know I would make a motion that we go out and do an RFP to find out what the current rates and interest is.
I'd second that.
And just
Wait a minute.
from a, it's too late.
Well, there's discussion.
I'm just kidding. I was going to say one thought is, I've always thought that, are there any more local legal firms that have an interest and experience in doing this?
John, can you just repeat your motion so that we can make sure we capture it?
Sure, I'll make a motion that we go out with an RFP to determine the interest of various legal entities in becoming the town council, and do it on an hourly and also a retainer, monthly retainer basis.
So my question is, if we currently pay about $600 a month, right?
Yep.
But we budget $40,000 for the year.
Don't seem right, does it?
We're budgeting $3,300 a month for something that we're spending $600 a month on. So now I get the point, if something comes up and you want to be prepared, and I understand that. But if you're gonna, I'm just trying to figure out the math. If you were gonna pay $2,500 a month,
That's $30,000 a year.
that's $30,000 a
So
year.
Can I
we've
ask-
been spending well over 30,000 annually up until last year. This year, we lost off, remember, at the end of last year, we still had, I believe we had the chicken case. We still had the cleanup property, or the junkyard issues on that property. And we had an unemployment case. We currently still have an unemployment case that just went through the district court, so that ranked up our cost for the first couple months of this year. And now we just have a few administrative and lower lying.
So I guess my questions will be more geared towards, after you go out to bid, do you bid out per hour or per month? Because,
Well, John was suggesting we
yes.
do the RFP to bid out and ask for proposals on both.
Okay.
Because, you're not sure what you're going to get. You might have a local firm who wants the business, and they say, you know what? We've looked at the history of the town, we've kind of got an idea of what we're really looking at here, and, we're willing to throw in a few extra hours as needed at the beginning, so we'll do a retainer for you to include X, Y, and Z services. We'll come to all your town meetings, we could come to all your board meetings if you want, we'll give you different prices
okay.
and so forth.
All right, so there's a motion on the floor to go out to bid for legal counsel in fiscal 17. Is there other discussion? There's a second by Charlie. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, moving right along.
About time.
We have a PCF we have two PCFs, both resignations from the fire department, David Moret and Lee Kozakowski. These resignations, one was almost a year ago, one was in September. They don't work here anymore, so I would accept a motion. I would accept a motion to sign the PCFs for those two employees.
I make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can I jump back to legal counsel RFP?
Yeah?
Would it be advisable to do it for a multi-year so that they would have some sense of,
I think when
Yeah.
you guys go through that RFP, you should add something in
Yeah.
the conversation.
Good idea.
I
Can you-
didn't hear your answer, that's sorry.
When you start to put the RFP together, you should probably have that conversation.
Well, we can also, John, just simply ask for, in the list of variety of saying hourly versus retainer, we can also say, give us a quote for 1 year and give us a quote
Yep.
for 3.
Right.
That way we don't have to go back.
Right, and we might get a better overall package. Thanks.
We have no PRFs. We have an application for David Zamba for a one-day alcohol license at Conant Park on June 4th from noon to 8 o'clock for a bridal shower. That's a long bridal shower, and I'm glad the one that I'm doing on Sunday is not 8 hours. But everything's been submitted, and I would accept a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
You also have an application by Michael J. Parenton for a one-day alcohol license at Conant Park on June 5th from 11 to dusk. Everything has been submitted. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
This is to keep Liz on her toes.
Trust me, I'm on my toes. Okay, so now we have a conversation about the collective bargaining contract for the Highway Department. The memorandum of understanding for the Highway Department was previously signed by the Board of Selectmen and the Highway Union. The contract has been reformatted, and both the union and the town are good to go with formatting corrections. You can give those to Heather. Sorry. So the summary of the contract includes addition of language to allow the town to advertise for positions in local newspapers and any other social media outlets, reducing the advertisement restrictions, a COLA of 2% for fiscal 16, 17, and 18, a one-step increase of 25 cents per hour, provided that pay amount is as is today, with current stipends included in the amount. All employees shall maintain all licenses currently recorded as a condition of employment. Emergency weather closing provisions, employees shall receive pay plus half-time for the hours worked during the hours which town hall is closed for emergency weather from Monday through Thursday from 8:30 a.m. to 4:00 p.m. only, and a 3-year contract in effect from July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2018. Is there a motion to sign the Highway Union contract through June 30th, 2018?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye. Then we have an agreement with Don Jacobs for consultation work on the Community Compact Cabinet Project for the Human Resource Wage Classification and Organizational Chart Study. I have a copy of the contract if you all would like to look at it. Otherwise, I would accept a motion to sign the contract. Do you need all of these pages signed?
Can use this sign.
Yes. I need all the pages signed on the collective bargaining agreement, because the union needs an original, Vicky needs an original, and we need an original, so everyone's got to be happy.
Thank you. Do you want to keep looking? You want me to keep going? No, go ahead, what? Keep going? Okay. Just for the record, there is a motion, it's waiting on a second to sign the contract.
Second. I made the motion.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second to sign the contract for the organizational study. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Next, we have a renewal of the insurance policy with Maya. Last year, we switched to Maya for our general workers' comp and police and fire insurance. We need to sign a form now to renew our agreement with this company. Is there a motion to sign?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There's a lot of signing going on here. Can pass those down. We have the Western Massachusetts Forest Legacy Area designation. Does the Board of Selectmen wish to sign a letter to support a forest legacy area in Western Massachusetts? Let me read you that letter. Hold on. The town of Southampton supports the proposed designation of a Western Mass Forest Legacy Area. Western Massachusetts has excellent forest resources that could benefit from additional funding to protect them. In addition to conserving the ecological integrity of this remarkable region, tracts of forest land contribute to spectacular scenic views, provide protection for public water supplies, sustain the forest-based economy, and offer exceptional recreational opportunities. We believe the Forest Legacy Program could be an important tool in conserving the region's forest resources while maintaining private ownership, and we strongly support the designation of the Western Mass Forest Legacy Area. Where is this area? All over? Is there one particular area that's a legacy, or is it all of the forest? You don't know? Okay. Do you care where it is, or do you want to support?
The document doesn't say it?
No, that's what it said. Just says the forest legacy area. I mean, I guess it could be the woods behind my house, it could be the woods across the street, it could be any of the trees.
Legacy area is an area that's been there a while.
Is that all of our trees?
I would assume it's old-growth forest. That's my assumption.
And what does it mean but that if you designate this, like you can't cut it down? What are the implications?
I would think it'd be protected.
We have questions. I have questions. Where is the forest legacy area? What does that mean? Like, if we designate this, can we not cut those trees down? Can we not build any more houses? What if they're in your
So the
backyard?
Forest Legacy Program was established in the 90s as a federal-state partnership. Massachusetts formally joined the program in 1993 and was one of the first states. Commonwealth now has 8 forest legacy areas which are able to access the program's funding. The majority of Western Massachusetts, a region with one of the largest intact forest blocks remaining in New England, and where forest resources are critical for the economic well-being and quality of life of many communities, is not currently designated. A newly proposed forest legacy area would close this gap and cover many towns in Western Massachusetts, including from the Connecticut River to the New York border, with the exception of the 21 towns in Franklin and Berkshire counties currently considering another program. The final boundaries of the proposed forest legacy area are still in discussion. A new forest legacy area would only serve to access another funding source for potential forest conservation projects that involve willing private landowners. There is no regulatory structure imposed on the area, and no landowner is obligated to participate. This effort to designate a forest legacy area in Western Mass is being led by a coalition of public and nonprofit organizations, including Kestrel Land Trust, the New England Forestry Foundation, PVPC, Hilltown Land Trust, Nature Conservancy, Berkshire Natural Resources Council, and the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Rec, among other partners. To support the Western Mass Forest Legacy Area designation proposal, there's been a request to us to submit a letter on behalf of the town of Southampton to explain how additional funding for the protection of working woodlands would benefit the community. And you have did you read the letter into the record?
I did read it. I'm
Okay.
just wondering by, saying we support this, what does it actually mean to us?
Does that make sense, or are there
Kinda.
additional?
Sounds like there's no commitment, but private landowners, if they want to opt in and ask for some grant funding and all that,
They
they
can.
can.
I think it's just looking to include the Western Mass area between the Connecticut River and the state of New York as one of these land areas.
So it opens
It's
up
like an
opportunity.
overshadowing of the map.
All right.
I'll make the motion, we accept it.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain. I don't think there's enough information here. I don't want to vote on something that there's not enough information.
Okay, so we have bill warrant 16-43 in the amount of $244,533.08, which we signed last week, but we need to vote on it. So I would accept the motion to sign that.
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then you also have payroll warrant, wait a minute. Payroll 16-43 in the amount of the same one? Doesn't make any sense.
I write the same number twice?
Yes,
I'm very sorry. I will just bring you the numbers.
thanks, because that
I
doesn't,
tried.
that didn't make any sense.
So this one is payroll, this one
We
is-
did that
She might have done it
So we have warrant 16-42 in the amount of $64,576.59.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Is that it there? We have minutes to approve from April 5th and April 12th. Would anyone like to make that motion?
So moved.
Is
On
there a
both.
second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
They're all in.
And then our next scheduled Board of Selectmen meeting is May 3rd, 17th, and 31st. The joint Board of Selectmen and Planning Board meeting, working meeting, you need to determine a date for that. You also need to determine a date to meet and review the fiscal 17 budget. So while you think about that, I'll tell you that the annual town election is on May 2nd. The annual town meeting is on May 17th. And there are 2 information sessions coming up, one on the stretch code on May 12th at 5:30, and one on the Cook and County Road project, May 12th at 7 o'clock. Now that you've had some time to think about it, when would you like to meet with the planning board? And when would you like to meet to talk about the budget?
So I think the planning board would like to meet after the annual town meeting.
Okay, so you
So it
have
gives
a
them
few more
time.
weeks to pick a date for that one.
And then on the budget, so where we are with that, Finance Committee and Finance Team are meeting again on Thursday. We would have met on Monday, except for the fact it was a holiday, and we try to avoid those so it doesn't throw people off. So we will be meeting on Thursday to continue going over that. Vicki and I have been going over that numerous times just to get the numbers and make sure we double-checked everything, make sure all the numbers are where they're supposed to be, and get them through the first pass of the budget, which is applying consistent rules throughout. Once we get through that, we should have a balanced budget and then a little extra to play with. Based on the little extra to play with, we were going to look at the rules, or the goals, rather, the Board of Selectmen had set in their October retreat, and also look at the requests that folks have submitted through the various departments and see which things make the most financial sense and which provide the most services, submit those answers, and then we were going to submit it to the Board of Selectmen for their review and modification. There have been a lot of requests from departments that they get another opportunity to advocate on behalf of their department, so I'm not sure how that's going to work, but ideally, if the Board of Selectmen could come up with a meeting date, preferably at the end of next week, maybe on Thursday, to discuss the budget, where it's actually televised, we review the whole budget piece. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck with doing it on May 3rd, which is the first meeting with a new Liz.
I'm sure Mr. Labrie does not appreciate being called a new Liz.
You may.
A new member.
A new member who will take Liz's seat, unless Liz takes her own seat, always possible.
So this is, when do you want to do this?
Thursday the 28th?
Yeah.
What time?
I would say you're going to want to start early, because I imagine
actually-
it's going to be a 2 to 3 hour fun, fantastic.
I can't do it. I'm overnight.
You can't do an overnight?
No, I'm at an overnight meeting.
I'll bring pizza.
Yeah.
When's your,
I'll better there.
so when are you available, John?
I can do it on Wednesday or Friday of then,
The 27th?
27th.
Yes? 27th?
Wednesday, yeah.
You're sure, John?
Yeah, I'm coming back Tuesday night, so yeah, I can do Wednesday.
The other option is we can do it Monday before, Monday, the day of the election, right before the Board of Selectmen meeting the second day. I can see Liz is excited about this prospect.
Well, I'm looking at that Wednesday, and I know that there's a birthday and soccer that day. And that Monday, there's just soccer.
Charlie's bringing pizza.
Whatever you want to do. What's wrong with the 27th? Nothing, okay. So the 27th, next Wednesday.
What time?
6, John?
6:30?
6:30 or 6?
30?
It's going to be, John,
Long
think
meeting.
long board meeting.
Think just getting back from vacation.
6 o'clock.
You'll be rested and
You'll be
ready to
rested
go.
at
Right in.
midnight then, won't you?
6 o'clock. I'm getting outvoted, okay.
All right, Wednesday at 6 o'clock. Okay. That's all set. With that, we're going to enter into executive session per Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21, under number 1, number 2, and number 3, and will not be returning to open session by roll call vote, please.
Kaneki, aye.
Martin, aye.
Moulton, aye.
Here's I.